This book certified 11 companies as permanently great. Circuit City went bankrupt 7 years later. Fannie Mae was seized by the United States government. Walgreens was sold for scrap last year. The method stands accused. Good to Great, the most influential business book in a generation, is on trial today. I've spent 17 years in international markets. I've seen this framework used, abused, and misapplied. Let's find out if it deserves its reputation or its graveyard.
In 2001, Jim Collins published the result of a 5-year research project. His team began with 1,435 companies, every firm that had appeared on the Fortune 500 across 3 decades. They were hunting for a single brutal pattern, an ordinary company that became an extraordinary one and then stayed there. The bar was deliberately savage. To qualify, a company had to post 15 years of average results, hit a clear transition point, and then beat the stock market by a wide margin for 15 straight years after. Not a good decade, not a lucky run. A documented leap sustained for a decade and a half. Out of 1,400 companies, only 11 cleared it. These were the 11 not glamorous companies, a drugstore chain, a steelmaker, a paper goods firm. Collins then asked the question that built an empire: what did they share that their direct competitors did not? The answer became 7 ideas that every MBA, founder, and consultant has cited for 25 years. Let's actually learn them. The book opens with 5 words: good is the enemy of great. Collins' point is that we rarely build great schools, great lives, or great companies, precisely because it is so easy to settle for good ones. Greatness, he argued, is not a function of circumstance. It is a function of conscious choice and discipline. Here is the architecture of that discipline. Every one of the 11 was led through its leap by what Collins called a level 5 leader, not the magnetic, magazine cover CEO. The opposite, a person who blends intense professional will with genuine personal humility. They are ambitious but for the company, not themselves. When things go well, they point out the window and credit others. When things go badly, they look in the mirror and take the blame. His example was Darwin Smith of Kimberly-Clark, a shy, awkward lawyer who weeks into the job was told he had cancer and a year to live. He worked for 2 more decades. He made the brutal decision to sell the company's century-old paper mills, its very identity, to attack the consumer market and take on Procter & Gamble. Asked later about his approach, he said only, "I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job." Most leaders set a brilliant new vision, then recruit people to execute it. The great companies did the reverse: first who, then what. They got the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats, and only then figured out where to drive. The logic is simple: if you have the right people, the problem of motivation largely disappears. And if the direction has to change, you're not stuck with a busload of the wrong crew. Collins named this one for Admiral James Stockdale, the highest-ranking American held in the Hanoi prison camps. Asked who didn't make it out, Stockdale answered instantly: the optimists, the ones who said we'll be home by Christmas, and then Christmas came and went and they died of a broken heart. The paradox: you must retain absolute faith that you will prevail in the end, and at the very same time confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. Hope without honesty kills. The fox knows many things, the hedgehog knows one big thing. Great companies, Collins found, are hedgehogs. They find the single point where 3 circles overlap: what you're deeply passionate about, what you can be the best in the world at, and what drives your economic engine. Walgreens didn't try to be a great everything. It decided to be the best, most convenient drugstore on earth and obsessively grew one number: profit per customer visit. Everything outside the 3 circles they ignored. When you have disciplined people, you don't need hierarchy. When you have disciplined thought, you don't need bureaucracy. When you have disciplined action, you don't need excessive controls. Collins told the story of a triathlete who, after every workout, rinsed his cottage cheese to wash off the extra fat, a tiny, almost absurd act of discipline repeated daily for years. Greatness, the book argues, is that, not one heroic effort, 1,000 quiet, fanatically consistent ones. This one feels heretical in 2026. Collins found that the great companies were never the pioneers of technology, but they were often pioneers in its application. Technology, he argued, is an accelerator of momentum, not a creator of it. Bolt a jet engine onto a company that has no direction and you just reach the wrong place faster. The right question is never what is the cool new tech. It is, does this fit directly inside our hedgehog? If yes, become a pioneer in using it. If no, ignore it. Picture a massive, heavy flywheel. You push and it barely moves. You push again and it inches forward. Push after push after push, and somewhere imperceptibly momentum takes over and the wheel flies. No single push did it. That is how every great transformation actually felt from the inside. No miracle moment, just relentless turns in a consistent direction. The opposite is the doom loop, lurching from program to program, a new direction every year, never building momentum, always pushing a cold wheel. So there it is, one of the best-selling business frameworks ever written, and now you genuinely understand it. It is coherent, it is teachable, it feels true, and that is exactly where the trouble starts. Imagine you studied every coffee shop that became a chain and found they all had friendly staff, good locations, and consistent recipes. You certify those as the 3 keys to success. The model is elegant right up until 3 of your certified shops close. The question was never whether the traits are real. It is whether they caused the success or merely described it. So we put the book in the dock. 25 years of evidence is now in. The court will hear both sides, and every fact you are about to hear is documented. First, the defense. The defense has a genuinely strong case. In November 2025, Kimberly-Clark Darwin Smith's company agreed to acquire Kenvue, the maker of Tylenol and Band-Aid, for $48.7 billion, the largest deal in its category in history. A company Collins called great a quarter-century ago is still making bold, disciplined, strategic moves at enormous scale. The principles, the defense says, did not die with the certification. And then there is Nucor, another of the 11. Decades on, it remains one of the most respected steelmakers in the United States, famous for exactly the things Collins documented: a fanatical culture, a profit-sharing model, disciplined capital. These are not coincidences. They trace straight back to the traits the book identified. The defense rests on a simple claim: the method works. These companies prove it. The prosecution is far less kind, and the evidence it brings is very hard to dismiss. Circuit City was one of Collins' showcase examples, a model of disciplined process and the right people on the bus. On November 10, 2008, it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. By March of 2009, all 567 stores were closed and liquidated. 7 years after the book certified it as enduringly great, it ceased to exist. Fannie Mae, the mortgage giant Collins held up as a hedgehog concept exemplar, was placed into federal conservatorship in September 2008. The United States government effectively seized it. This was not a rough quarter. It was the end of the company's independence in one of the largest interventions in financial history. It remains under government control to this day. Wells Fargo was Collins' celebrated Level 5 leadership example. Years later, employees opened roughly 3.5 million fraudulent accounts to hit impossible sales targets. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau fined the bank $185 million. CEO John Stumpf resigned in October 2016. And in 2020, the Department of Justice settled the matter for $3 billion. The humility and will story had become a cautionary tale. And Walgreens, the company whose hedgehog concept Collins praised most warmly, was taken private by Sycamore Partners. The deal closed on August 28, 2025, after shareholders approved it, ending nearly a century as a public company. The best, most convenient drugstore on earth had been sold off and delisted. Line it up: of the 11 certified greats, 1 bankrupt, 1 seized by the government, 1 caught in mass fraud, 1 sold off and taken private, 4 in the graveyard, and yet Kimberly-Clark and Nucor are still genuinely elite. The prosecution rests, but the case is not closed, because both of those facts are true at the same time, and that is the real mystery. Here is the twist neither side fully argued. The prosecution says the 4 failures prove the method wrong, but the defense's best examples, Kimberly-Clark and Nucor, seem to prove it right. Both cannot be true at once, unless the framework is doing something other than what Collins claimed it does. The methodology critic Phil Rosenzweig named the flaw in his 2007 book, The Halo Effect. Collins selected companies already known to be great, then looked backward for what they shared. That process reliably finds correlation; it cannot establish cause. There was no control group of failed companies that had the very same traits, and the awkward truth is that humble leaders, focused strategies, and disciplined cultures also show up in plenty of companies that collapsed. The traits are real, the certification is what overreached.
Here is my verdict. Good to great. I find you guilty of correlation posing as causation. The book did not fail. The certification did. Collins found traits that followed greatness and called them the cause of it. The coffee shop keys are real, but they are not sufficient and they do not predict. Kimberly-Clark and Nucor were already great before the framework arrived. Circuit City had all the right words in its annual report and still went bankrupt. Tell me where I'm wrong. Comment below.
But we didn't stop at one judge. We gave the same evidence to 3 different AI systems and asked them to rule. These are their genuine, unscripted responses, not written by us.
I agree with the guilty verdict, but I'd phrase it as overclaiming causation, not worthless insight. Collins captured real patterns of disciplined management, humble leadership, focus, cumulative momentum that are useful lenses for operators. But the research design cannot prove those traits caused greatness, and the later collapses of Circuit City, Fannie Mae, Wells Fargo, and others show how dangerous it is to treat a backward-looking screen as a predictive certification. So yes, the book still teaches, but the model should be read as descriptive wisdom, not a law of business physics.
I agree with the verdict. The research is a classic example of survivorship bias. You can't just study the winners and call their shared habits the cause of their success, because many failed companies likely shared some of those same habits. Where the framework still holds immense value, though, is in giving us a powerful vocabulary, like the flywheel or the hedgehog concept, to describe the qualities of a great company, even if it can't provide a guaranteed recipe to build one.
My genuine take, the book's framework isn't wrong, it's incomplete. Level 5 leadership, the hedgehog concept, and the flywheel describe how great companies operate once they are great. They do not reliably predict which companies will achieve or sustain greatness. The error is in the certification, treating a description of success as a recipe for it. Collins's companies were a snapshot of one era. The question was never whether the traits were real. It was whether they were sufficient. 4 certified companies in the graveyard proves they were not. The framework was a portrait. Can it also be a prediction?
Having heard all three, the appeal is partially granted. The framework has diagnostic value. It shows you why a great company works once it is already great. The certification, the act of declaring future greatness from past traits, is where the book overreaches. The guilty verdict stands. Partially.
So what is the book actually good for? One specific thing, diagnosis, not prediction. Don't use it to pick stocks. Don't use it to declare a company permanently safe. Use it the way a doctor uses a picture of a healthy body as a description of what good function looks like so you can spot where yours falls short. Ask the hedgehog question honestly. Where do your 3 circles actually overlap? Run the Stockdale test. Are you confronting your brutal facts or just telling yourself you'll be home by Christmas? Look at your flywheel. Are you pushing in one consistent direction or lurching into a new strategy every year? Used as a mirror, the framework is genuinely powerful. Used as a crystal ball, it puts companies in the graveyard.
The mistake is using it as a stock screen, or as a hiring test, or as a reason to say a company is permanently safe. No book written in 2025 about today's great companies will perfectly predict 2050. The method teaches you to look. It does not teach you to certify. Next time on Business on Trial, a framework almost no one has questioned, and the case against it comes entirely from its own data. Until then, study the methods, audit the certifications, and never mistake a description of the past for a guarantee of the future.